Hello, welcome back, dear viewers. I got something a little different today. I was watching the Legion of Myths live stream last night, talking about the OSR, what is the OSR, and it got me thinking, especially when they touched upon a topic that's near and dear to my heart, Fantasy Heartbreakers, and whether we really need any more clones out in the wild. But before I get into that, here's the use, right? This is what I generally do. I record myself playing games and I talk about those games. I got nothing against the flip through review, but I don't think you really get anything out of those. I think a deep dive is better and to let you know where you should be spending your money. I actually was going to do a deep dive into Curse of the Daughter's Brides this morning, but um, I got thinking about the game I ran and I got thinking about Lamentations of the Flame Princess more broadly, especially after reading this weird crusher from Joe Bittman. And I think I'm going to make a separate video about how Lamentations of the Flame Princess breaks all the rules and still is successful. So that will probably happen sometime after VengerCon because that's next week, and that's where I'll be. So, yes, Fantasy Heartbreakers. They are flooding the hobby, and it's something I've noticed since really kind of getting online and seeing everything that's out there in the OSR. I'm a fan of the OSR. I like the words, the letters OSR, old school Renaissance, old school revival, old school whatever. I think that's just pedantry, and I don't really think we need to talk about that. But one of the things I noticed immediately was just how much is out there. And initially, I wanted to try to see what I could do to highlight that. But after a while, I'm just noticing things that um, is ultimately like just a lot of noise, and I'm having a hard time like cutting through and finding the stuff that's like really good. Um, and I try not to be a hater. I'm not going to tell somebody, you know, at least publicly, your shit sucks, because I too try to write, and I've some stuff has been good, some stuff has been bad, but I know the process. You're bleeding onto the page, and I just don't want to be a dick. Um, Happy to talk to you privately, be like, hey, this is what I would do differently, kind of thing, right? Um, but yeah, there's just a lot of noise, and it's unfortunate because I think like I get it. Like you want to that brass ring. I think every game master, the moment they realize that, like, oh, I'm control this world and these rules are how I do it. Like you wanted to create your own thing. Like I totally, totally get it. But I think we've got enough heartbreakers out there. I think we have enough rule sets. I mean, at best, what you get from one of these retro clones is a compilation and distillation of all the rules of a particular early version of the game in a much easier to read format like OSC, Osric for Golden Glory. Um, OSC is still the gold standard, I think, for layout, and I'm not going to take that away from them. I didn't buy it though. I didn't engage in the most. Was it like a year or so ago? They did another Kickstarter to like update. Um, it's an interesting marketing tactic. I'll get into that some other time. But I didn't participate because I have the rules cyclopedia, and I like the rules cyclopedia. Um, Osric, I was thinking about hunting down just to own it, but then had a conversation and with the basic expert on his Gilded server some time ago, and he's said this a couple times publicly, and even last night on the Legion of Myth stream that you know the OSR has sort of uh, reached its or met its goal. Like WotC is reprinting the old rules, so you don't even need one of these retro clones. Especially if you're, out of intellectual curiosity, want to see how the original rules were written, right? Um, so So yeah. On the other hand, though, if you're not getting just like this compilation of rules, you're getting something that's got like a tweak or two that ends up kind of really being nothing more than a glorified gimmicky house rule. I don't want, again, I don't want to be a hater here, but there was a recent Kickstarter uh, for a game, and I'm really glad I didn't participate in that Kickstarter either, because at the end of the day, I think you got an overpriced set of rules that was just a gimmick. Now, that being said, there are games out there that I think are good. Um, Obviously, I'm a Lamentations of the Flame Princess fan, and it is my favorite little retro clone. At the time that game came out was what, 2008, 2009, I think. What it did was different and was somewhat revolutionary, and I think RPG Pundit said it was one of the first like second generation clones that kind of marshaled or ushered off into this new realm of the OSR. And Lamentations rule set, in conjunction with the rest of the product line, is providing you with something really different. Um, and I think that's important. Another one that is not a rehash and not a gimmick is Makuhito by the Basic Expert. He has expertly, no pun intended, expertly looked at the OE rule set and added something to it and took some few things away, tweaked it to give you an authentic Aztec game. Um, and that to me is key. And I'm going to get into this because this is where I think the OSR really needs to go. I don't really care about your Heartbreaker. I want to know, where can your creative energy go, and can it take me to a place that you know I've never seen or I couldn't have seen without your input. Um, there's no way I would have been able to write Makuhito. Period. Not saying that I'm like some great game designer myself, um, but I don't think content creators should be wasting their time. Um, they should be in trying to create some kind of like new take on OSC or AD&D or whatever. Um, I just think it's a waste of time. I know a guy who runs OSE games. He's a very good dungeon master, actually, and he has a list of homebrew house rules that he makes public to those who want to game with him, and it makes OSC a little bit less deadly. Um, and it's great for his table, and it's great for his play style. Uh, and I think that's true for every game master. But those little house rules don't need to be put into a pamphlet and put on Drive Through RPG. Sorry, I'm not trying to be a hater, but I just don't find that stuff interesting anymore. And it's I don't think you're challenging yourself when you do that. What I think content creators ought to be doing is something that is more challenging, and that is building settings and building worlds, and not just a reskin of the Forgotten Realms or a reskinning of Greyhawk. What are you doing that's going to make this game world interesting and 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 different and come to life? I gamed a lot in the 90s. I'm a 90s kid. Um, and it was in my opinion, the heyday for settings. Like, a lot of people in the OSR like to rag on second edition, but it did something very well, and it was settings. And Dragonlance, for example, I know that started in first edition, but with just a minor tweak of character classes, like no paladins, you got these knights, right? Magic users are different. There was no clerics, right? Um, that alone, in conjunction with the history and the lore of the world, created something very new. Um, Dark Sun, my absolute favorite from the 90s, was just the rules focused on the environment, and like asked some really interesting questions, like what would happen, if this was the case, and then these rules flowed from that. and then you have this amazing unique setting. I am If I ever win the Mega Millions, I am going to purchase Dark Sun from WotC to save it from WotC's tentacles and anyway. I promise you. So pray that I win the Mega Millions. Okay. Birthright is another good example from the 90s too. It's focused on domain play and stuff like that. Very different game. I never really played Birthright. I read the books. My friends were never really into domain play. They're still not, which is a bummer. But anyway, okay. But why is this more challenging? Okay. Well, on the one hand, if you're just doing a Heartbreaker with some house rules plugged in, you got a roadmap already, right? Just like, oh, okay, now I'm gonna type about fighters, and now I'm gonna type about combat and the initiative system and how I do it a little differently. That's easy. That's not challenging. I think designing a world that is going to be more than just a reskinned Forgotten Realms is really where the challenge is. You already have a set of rules, and you have to figure out what this rule, or excuse me, this world is going to be different and how that's going to translate. If the rules help to simulate the world, a well-crafted rule or set of rules will bridge the divide between the real world and the unreal, thus helping with an immersive experience. So like when you're thinking about world creation, like what's different about it that's going to create something unique for gameplay, you know. I've talked a little bit about this before, some years ago with the Basic Expert on his channel when we were talking about horror. Alien RPG, I think their panic mechanic is brilliant because it's a dice pool system, and the more panic dice that get put into the dice pool, the more stress you actually feel in real life. So like you're experiencing what your character experiences. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. Dark Sun did this very well. You start running low on water. That means you're going to have to start making saving throws. And if you fail that saving throw, you're going to start sliding towards chaotic evil alignment. And once that happens, once the party is just full of chaotic evil people desperate for water, you're going to have a TPK because they're going to kill each other. That actually happened in one of my games. It was awesome. They didn't like it. I thought it was awesome. But anyway, so I think that is the key right there. Like how is your world going to be different, and how are those rules going to help bridge that divide such that it creates this unique immersive experience for the people at the gaming table, including the game master. I think another thing content creators ought to be focusing on is supplements to make the existing retro clones a little different. At the risk of sounding like an elitist, and again, I'm trying not to be a hater, but I am just not interested in whole hum basic D&D fantasy anymore. I'm just not. Looking back, I think the most fun I had playing D&D was in the 90s when my buddy ran Dark Sun. He also ran this awesome Planescape game that was using 3rd edition. I still remember my character, Cedric Oragil. He was like this urban ranger on Sigil. Yeah, a bit of a drunk too. He was a bleaker, so he was very depressed. But yeah, it was a fun game. Like I still remember it to this day. But that was because it wasn't basic fantasy. I ran a 10-year-long campaign using 2nd edition, and it went into 3rd edition. It was a Forgotten Realms game. I had a paladin make it to level 17 before we finally the campaign kind of ended more due to attrition. Lives. We became adults, that sort of thing. But yeah, that was my high fantasy. That was my my high fantasy game, and I don't want to do it again. I've done it. What I'd like to see is something. So if I am going to play something more basic fantasy, I'd like to see something a little bit more unique in terms of the rules, and but it's got to be not a little more unique. It's got to be very more unique. It's got to be something more than just, oh, I tweaked this one little thing. Shadow Dark, I think, does this very well. It's a little old school. It's a little new school. Um, I'm glad I backed it, and it is my second favorite rule set with the rule cyclopedia right behind. I'm a BX guy at the end of the day, really. But but then you got something that this, while not strictly OSR, I think it was influenced by the OSR, and this is the Basic Experts Cowpunchers, and I love this. It's a dice pool system. It's very different, and it's also a different genre. It's the American Western epic, and just because I'm terrible at shilling my own stuff, if you want to make it Weird West and horrific, I got some rules here called Midnight Prairie. But that's the stuff that gets my blood, boiling and ready. Like gets me excited. It's like some really interesting new game mechanic. It's why I love Alien RPG, right? The Walking Dead. Um, Free League's response to the OSR is the Forbidden Lands. I think it is an OSR game, even though it's a pure dice pool system. It has all the elements that make like classic fantasy gaming, but it's so different because of the mechanics. But I don't. If you're not going to do that, I think don't waste your time. Try to find a niche with like supplements or game world that is going to help others take their ho hum retro clone into something greater. And Victor Gorchev, the Scrying Dutchman, does this wonderfully with Modern Necessities. I backed his upcoming one update. To be honest, I wasn't thinking about backing it because I already have this, but he's got three supplements attached to it that I really wanted. So that's really why I backed it. Plus, I think he's got a campaign. Um, yeah, there's also like a campaign with it as well. So I highly recommend this if you're into modern gaming. Um, but this is the kind of thing that I think content creators should be focusing on. So that kind of thing, like supplement, like I don't know, can you turn OSE or OSRIC into a supers game? I don't know. I'm not into supers games all that much, but there is an old TSR game. Oh, and I think the Gen X GM is developing a clone on that. So that's awesome. Like I should have backed that. Now, I found out about it late, so I wouldn't have been able to back it anyway. But that's the kind of thing people should be focusing on, in my opinion. In my opinion, obviously. Another thing is just finding your niche in some kind of world building um, that's kind of goes back to the world building. That question you're going to ask yourself, like, what would happen if I just did change the basic ho hum fantasy world this way? What would happen? I like Lion and Dragon. I think Sword and Caravan is pretty cool too. This is by the RPG Pundit. His whole shtick, if you know me, I'm sure you know who he is. It's medieval authentic. The rules really do feel medieval and authentic. It's not high fantasy. The magic is not everywhere. It's real subtle. If anything, it's more like Game of Thrones, where your magisters are like just really smart guys that have some forbidden knowledge and can do some weird stuff, like summon demons every now and again. It's lethal. You don't want to get hurt. There's another medieval authentic game out there. I think it's called Wolves of God or something like that. It's on my to buy list because I want to check that out too. Um, but yeah, like that's different. That's not basic D&D, right? Another thing, like I know I know the RPG Pundit has a Gonzo game, but nothing beats Chult. Chult is Gonzo gaming. I encourage you to pick up Venger Satanis' Chult. I have the entire trilogy. I own everything related to Chult. I absolutely love it. I just haven't had a chance to run anything with it really. I ran a few one shots with my in-person gaming crew, um, but yeah. Um, the Wretched Verse is another game um, that I think y'all should check out. It's the Red Room. I worked on the update to it last year, and Miguel and I were like, hey, let's try to make this as cinematic as possible because that's their appendix N. A lot of their influences come from movies, and it does the game does feel different. And where I think the Red Room really excels are these setting books. They're part historical, part pulp adventure. I'm really big fan of Wretched Interbellum and Wretched Epic, and this is their Wretched New Flesh is like their weird cyberpunk um, game setting, and it's huge too. It is so big. Anyway, that sounded somewhat erotic. Sorry. Anyway, um, and then you got like a classic one that came out some years ago. I was able to hunt this down, Yoon Suin. It's just Southeast Asian, and there's got like crabmen in it, slugmen, um, all this stuff that just makes the world different. But you got these new rules that you can pull from and use elsewhere, and that I think you know reusability is a key function of these settings and supplement books. So people feel like they're getting their money's worth. I think writing adventures is fun, and if you got a good idea, by all means write that adventure. But they're often one and done. But with a setting book, you're offering like a toolkit to the purchaser. So even if they're not going to like play in the world that you created, they're going to be using something from it. Like I could totally, like I'll probably never run Yoon Suin. I've played in it in a Brodiental Adventures game, and I love the Slugman character class. I could totally see myself using it in like maybe a Chult game or even a Lamentations game. I might actually think about that now that I just mentioned it. Yeah. And then going back to Lamentations of the Flame Princess, there is a host of hex crawl worlds that are just amazing. Carcosa being one of the big ones. I mean, it's got some rules in there that you can pull from and use, though that is not for the faint of heart. A Red and Pleasant Land, I'm currently running. That is a wild take on Alice in Wonderland. K Long is one that I wanted to run on my channel. I was having a hard time finding people willing to try it out, but that's another Southeast Asian setting with a lot of rules on disease because there's something going on. But anyway, point being is I really feel like this is the direction the OSR needs to go if it wants to remain relevant, and now is the time because to me, WotC is floundering. To me, um, what is what is about to be produced by them, what's about to be released. I haven't really looked too deeply into it. I probably will soon. Um, it just does not look good. And 4 years ago, the conventional wisdom of, the rising tide raises all ships or whatever. So if WotC's doing well, the OSR will do well. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think the the ship is sinking, and it's going to create a vacuum, and something's got to fill that void. I have a couple ideas where I think who might be able to fill the void, um, but but that's a conversation for another day because it's wrapped into the complete lack of business acumen that I've noticed in the OSR. All due respect, all due respect. Um, but anyway, I don't know. I guess that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it got you thinking about stuff. I want to say thanks to Legion of Myth to actually having someone talk about the OSR in the way that they had that conversation. And yeah, yeah. So anyway, I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and I'll probably do some updates from VentureCon, like little shorts, because VentureCon's a good time. It'll be my third year going. All right, Yang Saraka lives.